alcohol and sugar don't make for great playmates. I don't love sugar in any amount anyway, but it certainly leads to an increased negative reaction when combined with alcohol.
What is it that people ought to know about alcohol? Because you are a fine wine purveyor, but you have some, for somebody who sells wine for a living, you have some controversial views on alcohol.
I do. I think the thing that surprises most people to hear me say, because they think I'm the wine guy, I'm here to promote wine, is that alcohol is a very dangerous neurotoxin. And I don't think drinking it in any amount is healthy for humans. Some people shouldn't drink at all. Alcohol ruins millions of lives every year. And if you don't drink today, I'm not recommending that you start. However, if you're like me, I love wine. And so the fact that I think that alcohol is generally unhealthy, is toxic, I still love wine. I drink wine every day, except when I'm on an extended water fast. And I generally drink about a bottle of wine a day. So I'm not a lightweight drinker. I love drinking wine, but I want to make smart choices about that wine. And so, in the biohacking movement, which I've been an active participant in for about a decade, in the biohacking movement, it's very common to recommend tequila as an alcohol choice, because it's distilled and it's, quote, clean. I agree with all that. My problem with tequila is that it's 45% alcohol. And alcohol is a domino drug. So what I mean by that, much like cocaine, is that domino drugs draw you in. The more you drink, the more likely you are to drink more and faster. You probably had this experience. Mm-hmm. And so I tend to approach alcohol with a strategy for drinking, right? And so I happen to love wine. I don't love alcohol, although I like getting high. So it comes with a bit of a mixed bag for me, right? And so when I think about drinking wine, I think about the pleasures I get and the joy I get from drinking it. And so I think the joy that it creates is healthy for me. I think that the euphoria that it creates and the bond it creates with people that I'm drinking with and exchanging food and wine and banter and laughter and love is very healthy. The alcohol itself facilitates and helps facilitate some of that. So from that perspective, I could say this euphoric high from alcohol is a positive thing. Wine is unique among alcoholic beverages in that the grower, at least in the case of my wines, the grower is the same person who ferments, the same person who bottles it, the same person who grows it, right? So, and the other startling fact that most people don't realize is that only 5% of wines in the world are grown organically. And in California, I don't sell domestic wine. I don't drink domestic wine. I only sell and drink European wines. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that, but there's no American wines that meet our standards of purity. And so, but in California, only 4% of vineyards are farmed organically. That means that in California, 96% of all wines are farmed with toxic chemicals. Now, the reason that's important is because the environmental group that publishes the Dirty Dozen list of fruits and vegetables that retain the highest degree of toxicity from farming, herbicides and pesticides, on the Dirty Dozen, wine grapes are number 8.
Wow.
It used to be number 6. And so now the wine industry's response to this is largely the same as the wheat industry and the food industry about glyphosate. And glyphosate is the number 1 applied herbicide in U.S. vineyards. So the wine industry's response to both toxic farming and additives we'll get to in a moment because that's a separate topic. The wine industry's response is these chemicals in farming, even though they are found to be retained in the fruit itself at a high degree as it compares to other fruits and vegetables, these chemicals, including glyphosate, which I believe is probably a carcinogenic, and there are thousands of other health authorities around the world who agree, you probably think so too, but based on the evidence. But their response is that these chemicals are not present in large enough amounts to be harmful to your health. And my position is quite simply just this. If I can drink wine that tastes better and that makes me feel better and contains none of these toxins, I'll make that choice, right? We don't need to have a debate whether or not these toxins are harmful to my health. I've already freely admitted that alcohol is also a toxin, but I'm willing to take that one for the reasons we already discussed: the euphoria, the banter, the laughter, the love, the joy that it creates. I'm willing to take that toxicity. But as it relates to these farming chemicals, if I don't have to drink them, why would I choose to drink them if I can get an affordable, better product that doesn't contain them? And so I don't need to have any kind of long-running debate about whether or not they're harmful. I'd just rather not have them at all.
I get it.
So that's kind of how I think about that. I want to mention also, Max, I think it's important to note, I'm going to give you a lot of startling facts, like 95% of wine in the world is farmed with toxic chemicals. I'm going to give you a lot of these kind of surprising facts that people wouldn't know. These are not my opinions. These are all scientific sites or government issued, like in the state of California. The agricultural department publishes the exact number of acreage of wine grapes that are farmed organically and those that are not organic. And you can just do a division equation and learn that it comes to 4%. And so we're going to also talk about some toxic additives and other things that are going in wines. And so none of this, while the facts might be surprising, none of this is my opinion or something I've made up. You can go to our website, or you can put in your show notes links to documents that will verify through third-party sites like the National Institutes of Health of everything I'm going to share with you. So I think it's just that some of it is so shocking and surprising that it's just kind of hard to believe. It sounds like that, I'm here to sell wine, and fortunately I make a decent living selling wine, a very specific, natural, healthier wine. I'm super grateful for that. But my job is not really to sell wine today. It's to educate people on if you're going to drink, how I think you should think about drinking, and specifically how you should think about wine based on my expertise and study of the topic.
Yeah, I would never promote alcohol, but I am very upfront with my audience that while I'm not a frequent drinker, I am not dogmatic in that stance, and I do occasionally imbibe. I mean, I'll have a glass of wine a couple times a month, primarily in the context for me of dating. And I enjoy it in that context. I really genuinely do. And it's informed consent because I know the cost of consuming ethanol, which is, of course, the compound in drinkable alcohol that gives you that buzz. But yeah, I think if you are going to drink, then it's really important to be able to make healthy decisions with full informed consent. And I've always said, whenever the topic of alcohol comes up and I start talking about my drinking habits, I mean, I'm very appreciative of dry farm wines because, and we haven't had like any kind of commercial relationship. You've been super generous in the sense that you give me wine, which I'm always grateful for. When we did our screening for my documentary in New York recently, you guys hooked us up so we could have, some wine to serve our audience members. And whenever I drink dry farm wines, I don't know what it is, and I guess we're gonna get to this. I'd love to have you explain, but I never seem to have a hangover, which I think is like the most important aspect, right, for me. Like one of the biggest, I think, barriers to, well, not that I would drink more, but I mean, it really sucks having a hangover. And as I get older, I find myself more prone to getting them, but I haven't had one after consuming dry farm wines, which I think is, there's something special that you guys are doing.
Yeah, there's no question that, as you age, metabolizing alcohol becomes more challenging, leads to more frequent adverse effects from drinking. But a comment is commonly people discuss that our wines don't give you a hangover and that they're hangover free. Look, if you drink enough of anything that contains ethanol, you'll get a hangover. If from nothing else, from dehydration.
Maybe it's just that I've gotten better at drinking over the years.
Well, it's, I don't know that you're any better at it, but you hadn't gotten any worse probably. And so, but the thing is we lack any real scientific data on why people feel bad from drinking wines, particularly red wine. There's no scientific data on that. But here's what we do know anecdotally, and millions of people have experienced this. If you drink our wines, which are sugar-free, sugar leads to a worse hangover. If you've had margaritas versus taking a shot of tequila, you'll know that alcohol and sugar don't make for great playmates. I don't love sugar in any amount anyway, but it certainly leads to an increased negative reaction when combined with alcohol. And so we don't really know why these additive-free, lower alcohol. It's also fair to note we only sell and drink lower alcohol wines. So wines today in America are generally around 15 or approaching up to 15% alcohol. We don't sell anything over 12.5. Most of the wines I drink are between 10 and 11%. That makes a huge difference. It doesn't sound like much, 11 or 15, 11 or 14. It doesn't sound like much, but it makes a huge difference in how you feel. It also makes a huge difference in how the wine tastes. So first and foremost, we're really taste masters. We're obsessed with taste. And so for us, organic wines taste better. It's just like when you go to the farmer's market. This is a little bit, let's break down organic into two categories. The small family farm, that's what you see at the farmer's market, or what I'll call industrial organic, which is still organic but just at scale. And it produces a different spiritual connection to the fruit or vegetable in the end. So when you go to the farmer's market and you look at these fruits and vegetables and you're like, they're so beautiful and vibrant, you just only want to take a picture of them, right? And so the fruit and vegetables in your organic section of the grocery store don't look the same as what you see at the farmer's market. And that's because this farmer's market is a real commitment. These hippies are activists. They have this glow about them, right? I mean, they're living at one with nature, and they have a spiritual connection to living soils. And so there's just a lot more attention to cultivating this type of fruit or vegetable that results in something that looks like it's filled with love. Well, natural wine farmers, the same family farms that we buy wines from, are very small and look very much like the people you see at the farmer's market, right? And these wines just taste better. And so in addition to the fact that they're also fermented with wild native yeast. So a natural wine, which is what I sell and drink exclusively, natural wine has three pillars. One, it's always organic or biodynamically farmed. Biodynamic farming is a prescriptive advanced form of organic farming. Number two, they're fermented with wild indigenous native yeast. Commercial wines are fermented with lab-cultured GMO yeast. And the reason for that is because the native yeast, when you harvest a grape berry anywhere in the world, a wine grape berry, it has yeast on the skin. It's collected naturally through the flora in the vineyard. It's a white waxy film. You can scrape it off with your fingernail, and it's actually yeast.
Interesting.
That yeast leads to a spontaneous fermentation in natural wine because you don't require anything to make wine other than sweet grape juice and yeast. And when the yeast inoculates, which in the wild native yeast is spontaneous because it's already present.
Wow.
And so and for those who've ever been in a wine region or wine country region around the time of harvest, which in this hemisphere is between August and October, if you're there after harvest, much of the fruit, I used to live in Napa Valley, much of the fruit falls to the ground and it just breaks open naturally. And when it breaks open, the yeast activates, and you can actually, for a period of about a month in the wine country regions, the air will smell like fermenting wine.
Wow.
And it's actually grapes that are fermenting on the ground that have been cut off and for whatever reason weren't selected for harvest, but they have yeast on the skin, and when it breaks open, falls to the ground, it'll start fermenting.
So cool.
Yeah, and what's called a spontaneous fermentation. So, but the reason that commercial winemakers don't use these yeast for fermentations because they're quite unstable. They're They're temperamental. You can't make wine in very large volume using them. They'll break down. If the alcohol level gets too high, the alcohol will kill a native yeast, where the modified GMO yeast have been genetically modified to withstand a higher alcohol environment and to be sturdy and strong, right? And then the third component of the natural wine is that they're additive-free, which takes me to the topic of additives. In the United States, there are 76 legally approved additives for the use in winemaking.
76.
76. Of those, in fairness to the wine industry, some of them are natural, and many of them are not, and some are quite toxic. And so, of the 76 additives, 2 of them are classified by the National Institutes of Health. You probably know the National Institutes of Health has a database called PubChem, which classifies and rates virtually all known chemicals in the United States. And so the National Institutes of Health, in their PubChem database, classifies 2 of these additives as acute toxins. Acute toxin has a clinical definition. It means that a single or multiple doses within a 24-hour period could be fatal. That's the clinical definition of an acute toxin. So 2 of the 76 are acute toxins, including the most dangerous additive in wine, known as dimethyl dicarbonate. If we have time, we can get back to that one, but that's the most dangerous.
And why is a chemical like that added to wine typically?
Dimethyl dicarbonate is used to kill the most common bacterial fault in wine called Brettanomyces, commonly known as Brett. It's an off-putting aromatic and taste to wine. It's a bacteria that gets in cellars. It's the most common bacterial fault. There are a number of what are known as wine faults. Many of them are bacterially related. Dimethyl dicarbonate is used to treat this bacterial fault. 12 of the 76 additives are classified as health hazards by the National Institutes of Health. 4 of them are required to be derived from 6 different animal organs, including pig pancreas, cow stomach, fish bladder. If you care about animal rights or you care about animal products, that would be important to you.
Wow, so some wines aren't vegan.
Correct.
For the plant-based eaters
many are not.
Interesting.
All of our wines are.
Wow.
We don't allow the use of animal products in any of our wines.
Interesting. I mean, that wouldn't be a concern to me, but I would imagine that there are a lot of people who are likely being deceived when they consume wine.
I'm not suggesting that these additives, as these derivatives from animal products, are toxic or harmful. We don't know what they do.
No, but some people choose to avoid animal products
they just
for
choose
ethical.
for various reasons. It's just these are just little known facts, and so again, the wine industry's point of view on this, and they have. They've testified both publicly and in courtrooms around this. They've also, the primary wine lobby in Washington, known as Wine America, is the leading lobby group for the wine industry, publicly opposes, on their website, transparent labeling. Now, the reason you don't know anything about these wine additives is because the wine industry has spent millions of dollars in Washington, where you use money to buy special favors, to keep wine labeling off of wine bottles. And so wine makers are not required and do not disclose the ingredients that's in a wine bottle. Also, there's no nutritional panel on a wine bottle either.
It drives me nuts.
And so, because if I pick up something I'm going to consume, I want to know what's in it.
Of course.
And I want to know how much sugar's in it primarily. So the wine industry takes this point of view that these chemicals are not used in high enough amounts. The dose is the poison, right? These chemicals are not used in high enough amounts to be harmful to humans. I take the same point of view I take about toxic farming. If I can drink wines that are affordable, that taste better, and are better for me and don't contain any of these additives, I'll choose that, right? Although you don't have that choice when you go into a wine retailer or a grocery store. You don't have the choice of knowing what's in the wine because they have successfully lobbied against transparent labeling. We are hugely supportive of transparent labeling, including nutritional information on a wine bottle. Now, if you go to Wine America's website, the primary reason that they object to, there are two reasons why they object to transparent labeling on a wine bottle. Number one, they say is not enough real estate. Now, there's transparent ingredients and nutritional information on packaging a fraction of the size of a wine bottle. So clearly we know there's real estate. Actually, our wine label now includes ingredients and a nutritional panel. It took us nearly a year to get it approved by the government agencies who didn't want us to put it out there. But so the second reason that they cite for not putting transparent labeling information on a wine bottle is that it would confuse consumers. I don't buy into either of those arguments. The Center for Public Interest in Science filed a federal lawsuit last year against the Treasury Department. The Treasury Department actually oversees the wine and spirits business as it relates to the federal government. It's not overseen by the FDA as most consumables are. If it were overseen by the FDA, under FDA law, it would be required to have an ingredients and a nutritional panel on it. But instead, the wine industry is carved out and is actually managed by the Treasury Department. It brings up an interesting irony about also the food plate and the Department of Agriculture. So the food pyramid, or now known as myplate.gov, is actually administered by the Department of Agriculture. And the irony of that is that the Department of Agriculture's primary goal is to sell grains.
Right.
It's not to inform you about your health.
Right.
As you know, it's Cheerios are rated as more healthy than an avocado, according to the Department of Agriculture. The primary ingredient in Cheerios is grain. So you have a similar thing with wine and spirits. They're legislated by the Trade and Tax Bureau, known as the TTB, which is a division of the Treasury Department. The Treasury Department, their goal in life is not to inform you about the hazards of drinking or ingredients. Their goal is to generate tax dollars and to sell alcohol. So, I mean, the whole thing is just misaligned, right, in terms of who's giving advice to whom about what.
Yeah.
How did all this happen? Well, this is the final part of the story about what happened in wine. Massive corporate consolidation. The same thing happened in the food industry. So in the food industry, more or less, you have 10 companies that make most everything on the inside aisles of the grocery store, right? In the wine business, you're basically the same thing. So fueled by private equity and public money, you had a roll-up. It's called a roll-up of the industry over the last few decades. So today, the top 3 wine companies, again, this is not my opinion, it's all published fact. The top 3 wine companies make 60% of all U.S. wines.
Wow.
And the top 25 wine companies make 90% of all wine.
Wow.
And so when you go to the grocery store and you see these aisles and these shelves of wine products, most of those wines are made by a handful of companies. Now, they don't want you to know that, so they hide behind thousands of brands and labels. And they put cute animals or animal cell wine, or they put, a picture of a farmhouse or a chateau to have you believe that this is where you're drinking from, right? Or they use important architectural assets in places like Napa Valley, where they'll have, a famous wine family right on Highway 29 with a beautiful, quaint tasting room, and that's where you think the wine comes from. But it's really, this wine is being made in massive factories in Central California.
Wow.
That are multiple football fields large.
Whoa.
And that's where the wine is made, and then it gets bottled up on all these different labels and gets distributed through the 3-tier system. So when I decided that I didn't start Dry Farm Wines off as a business. It was really a personal pursuit of trying to find a better way to drink wine that made me feel better. As I was aging, wine was making me just feel bad, but I love drinking. I love drinking wine. I don't drink anything but low alcohol natural wine that's sugar free today, organically farmed. That's all I drink, and I feel great. I feel great about it. I don't feel great about alcohol. I've already made that case, but I'm willing to take a little bit of the poison with the fun. And I do think the fun is healthy.
Yeah, the fun is healthy.
It will improve your dating life as well.
I mean, I don't have to drink on a date, but it's something that
it improves your dating life. We have to admit it's more fun.
I mean, for me personally, I'm not saying that anybody listening to this who doesn't drink needs to drink and it's going to magically improve their dating life, okay? But I think for me, it's something that I enjoy. I enjoy when I am engaged romantically with somebody to occasionally have a glass of wine with them. I think it's really fun and romantic.
I prefer a bottle as a glass, but I'm a little heavier handed than you.
It's I don't know, and I like things that have, what's the term, that there's like legacy. I like foods and ingredients and even material objects that have history behind them. Like I feel like if I'm sitting in a car that has
craft,
that has like a legacy behind it of craft, it makes me feel there's something special about that experience. Tasting a really good extra virgin olive oil, tasting a really good glass of wine. I think there's something really special about that experience. To be a connoisseur.
Yeah, well, I mean, wines are, and olive oil is the same way. I mean, olive oil is really about place and process, right? Yeah. Wine is about the place and the process. It's about craft. Yeah. It's about human craft. And, craft is just like one of the greatest luxuries in the world.
I would agree with that.
And, and there are luxury companies that have created a lot of wealth around craft.
Even applied to clothing. I mean, buying a nice pair of shoes.
Leather goods. Yeah. It's just this history, this heritage. And for better or worse, much of that comes from Europe. Europeans have been making wine for over 3,000 years.
Yeah.
And so this craft, this sense of history and heritage, is just, and people, I'm sure you've had this experience or had people tell you this, when they go to Europe and they drink wines, and they don't feel the same as they feel like when they're drinking wine here. And that's not to suggest that all European wines are better made or less toxic. That's certainly not true either. There are 56 additives approved for use in the EU. So it's just that in America, we love to do things at scale, right? Including winemaking and including generating wealth at scale. And so, wine companies are not trying to make wine healthier or better. They're trying to make it cheaper and faster, right? And so there's a lot of methods for doing that. One is toxic farming, right? It's a lot cheaper to use chemicals in farming than it is to farm organically. Another is irrigation. The name of our company is Dry Farm Wines. What dry farming means is that farming without the use of irrigation. Irrigation in the United States is nearly ubiquitous. Less than 1% of U.S. wines are unirrigated. And irrigation comes with a whole lot of implications as it relates to the quality of the product and as it relates to the planet. Same thing for organic farming. I'd rather support an organic farm than one that spreads chemicals. I'd rather support a farm that farms without irrigation, considering that we're in a global drought, right? It's not necessary, although it's cheaper, it's not necessary to use irrigation to farm grapes, although it's a lot easier and a lot cheaper, which is why it's ubiquitous here. But irrigation comes with implications to the planet as well as implications to the quality of the fruit. So when a vine is unirrigated, it struggles against its neighbor and against against life to flourish. It struggles to use with roots that are like small capillaries, like size of a hair, right? That go out and break apart soil and minerals, looking for moisture. And so the root structure on an unirrigated grapevine can be 20 or 30 feet deep and long.
Wow.
An irrigated grapevine, when you yank it out of the earth, has a root structure that's about 4 feet in diameter, about 4 feet deep. And the reason for that is that it gets its water and its nutrient from nitrogen out of a little tube that's just above the trunk, and it just drips down. So this also removes a lot of struggle, and anybody who grows fruits and vegetables will know that the struggle a plant experiences contributes to the complexity of the fruit. And this is particularly true of grapevines. Another reason why they're planted close together is to create a sense of struggle and competition among the vines.
Do we know if that leads to higher antioxidant value in the fruit?
It does, both in unirrigated and organically farmed.
Wow. Yeah.
For homeostasis. I mean, the science makes perfect sense. That polyphenols, antioxidants, are going to be higher in a plant that struggles more.
Yeah.
Both from a lack of irrigation as well as organic farming.
Fascinating. So just to bring it back, we know that the top of the hierarchy, both in terms of quality and safety, you find natural wines. So natural is really what is the ideal.
It's a confusing term to consumers because in the food world, natural is code for sustainable, or something that I want to suggest is better for you.
Well, it has no real meaning.
It doesn't have any meaning. It doesn't have any meaning in the wine world either, except that there is an international understanding of what a natural wine is. France will be the first country this year to actually certify natural wines. Dry Farm Wines, my company, created the strongest, most stringent certification for wines in the world. So we have a certification. And one of those certifications is organic or biodynamic. Another certification is native yeast fermentation, animal-free product, sugar-free, lower in alcohol. These are all a part of the certification that Dry Farm Wines created to add a certified quantification to each of our products.
I love it.
And so, our customers depend on us and trust us to curate a very specific type of wine experience, both from a taste point of view and a health point of view.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, Dry Farm Wines, one of the things I love about it is that it takes the guesswork out of wine shopping. And that's why I just have you guys send me wine, and I just trust whatever it is that you send me. But for consumers who are listening to this, how is your average person to interpret what they see on the label of a bottle of wine? And what are the things that they should be looking for?
Well, there's nothing to look for because there's no information there. It's simply a story or an image or some emotion that the designer wants to create. Let's say if it's an animal or it's a farmhouse. So it's really a motive. It's not informative at all. In fact, the only thing that's on a wine bottle that's informative is not even required to be accurate under the law. So the only thing that's on a wine bottle that's informative is the amount of alcohol. So every wine bottle is required to have the amount of alcohol stated on the bottle. And I say stated because it's not required by law to be accurate. So if it says 14%, it could be as high as 15.5% and still be legal. There's a reason for that. Back in post-Prohibition, when most of the alcohol regulations were written in the early 1940s, late 1930s, when most of this very antiquated, archaic legislation was written at that time, you couldn't get an accurate, always agreeable alcohol test from lab to lab. They would vary. And so they built in this variance in order to allow for some wiggle room. Well, today and for many years now, that technology is exact and precise. If you test alcohol at one lab, it will test exactly the same in the next. So there's no need for this variance. But wine companies like it because it allows them to oftentimes understate alcohol. And then there are certain federal excise taxes that are affected by alcohol. So in some cases, the higher the alcohol, the higher the excise tax. So if they state a lower amount of alcohol in the wine, they potentially pay less tax.
Interesting. So what alcohol percentage? Because one of the things that you guys that you mentioned being something that you appreciate about the wine that you produce is that it's lower in alcohol. So is there a percentage that people should be looking for?
We sell wines between 7 and 12.5%. And for me,
are you just gonna have to drink more?
No, you'll get high. Don't worry. People say, well, I want to get high. Don't worry. You'll get high on 11% alcohol. It's just a different kind of high. It's a softer rise. It's a more gentle experience. It's not like getting clubbed in the head. You're going to get just as high the more you drink. It's just you're going to be able to drink more without getting as high. And the ascent of getting high is more gentle and, from my point, a whole lot more pleasant.
Yeah.
Right. It's just easier. You don't seem to quite notice it the same, and you can drink more, which is why I'm able to drink a bottle or more per night.
There you go.
It's because I'm drinking lower alcohol wine, and I'm just not that guy who has a glass of wine.
Yeah. What's the deal with sulfates? Sulfites? Sulfites.
Well, it's a bit of a red herring. I say that because anything that's fermented has sulfites in it. There are many food products that are much higher in sulfites than wine. But here's the deal on sulfites. Here's what we're looking for. We're looking for, has sulfur dioxide been added to sterilize the wine? So what that means is that naturally occurring sulfites in wine, sulfites are measured in parts per million. So the U.S. legal limit is 350 parts per million for any wine. Our average wine at Dry Farm Wines tests at 39 parts per million, although we will allow up to 70 parts per million on the thesis of that's a generally accepted standard globally for how high naturally occurring sulfites can be. We don't see it. As I said, our average wine tests out at 39 parts per million, so we don't see them that high, but the international accepted standard is that they could be as high as 70 parts per million and still be naturally occurring, although we never see it. But for natural wine, authorities and experts around the world, that's the limit most people set. Here's how sulfur dioxide gets in wine. It is, or how sulfites become high. Typical wines will have between 1 and 200 parts per million. That's because sulfur dioxide has been added in the wine to sterilize it. What we call mummify it, to kill the wine, to kill any living bacteria that's in the wine, including gut-friendly bacteria that Dr. David Perlmutter's written about a number of times, about natural wines and the gut-friendly bacteria that's still alive in natural wines because it hasn't been sterilized.
Interesting.
The sterilization, we also call it McDonaldizes the wine. So every single bottle is going to taste exactly the same, no matter how long it sits on the shelf, because all of these living organisms and bacteria, many of which we think are healthy, have been killed. Right? And so natural wines are not great for aging for 50 years, right? Those wines are all sulfured. And so typically speaking, we like to see a natural wine consumed within 7 or 8 years of purchase, right? Most people don't. 90% of wines are consumed within 24 hours of purchase, first of all. So most people are not cellaring wines, but for those who do, natural wines are not ideal for long-term cellaring 20, 30, 40, 50 years because they've not been sterilized.
Interesting. So, so they still undergo anaerobic fermentation.
They can. It depends on it. Generally not, because you generally in order to have a post-bottle fermentation, you'd have to have the presence of sugar. And if it's fully fermented out, you wouldn't have a post-bottling fermentation unless there was, theoretically, it can happen and does happen in natural wines sometimes. We don't sell those wines. I don't like the taste of them because they have a fermented type. I mean, they have a spritzy sort of a spritzy aromatic and a spritzy mouthfeel that we just don't like.
Interesting.
It can happen, but it has to have residual sugar of some amount left behind. And in dry farm wines, we lab test every wine for purity. We lab test it for alcohol. We lab test it for sugar. Because remember, the wine stated to us may or may not be accurate. We want to make sure that it's lower alcohol. We want to make certain that it's sugar-free.
Great.
And so the only way we'd have a post-bottle fermentation is if there was some sugar left behind. Not all natural wines are sugar-free. So, we were largely misunderstood in the natural wine world, when we showed up because we cared about these things that nobody else cared about. Winemakers, particularly the French, would be quite difficult. And I would be in Europe at natural wine fairs and, they would be offended by my asking about lower alcohol.
Yeah.
It's like, my wines are balanced. Why do you care about alcohol? It's like, well, because we and our customers care about alcohol consumption.
They're like, along come these arrogant American biohackers wearing the funny blue blocking glasses. Who are these guys?
Exactly. So it was, so we were a bit of an anomaly, and even in this already strange world of natural wine and these hippie activist farmers. Then we come along with a whole new set of ideas, like sugar-free. Not all natural wines are sugar-free. Many are, some are not. We reject. It's also interesting, natural wines sometimes are a little strange or different. We also don't buy those wines. So we only accept 21% of the wines that we taste and test, eventually make it into our lineup and our portfolio. Either we won't like the taste of it, or it will come back and fail labs. It may have sugar in it. It may have, it may be higher in alcohol than we allow. Rarely sulfites are not an issue because natural wine growers are pretty unified in their approach to how they think about sulfur.
Are sulfites related to hangovers? I think that's a common
there's
perception.
there's no evidence of that here. As I mentioned earlier, much of what we know about drinking natural wine and not having a hangover or having fewer negative remnants from drinking, much of what we know is simply anecdotal. So there's no scientific studies, and I don't represent anything scientific about anything I've told you other than these are the facts. But we don't really know what they mean. But anecdotally, what we do know, I drink a lot of wine. If I drink conventional wine, I feel like hell, right? I drink natural wine, I feel great. So, and this is the experience of millions of other people, right? And so, and hundreds of thousands of people who buy our wines, right? And who tell us constantly, I used to drink this, I can't drink it anymore. I can't drink conventional wines. And in the rare occasion when I drink conventional wine, it's super rare, maybe on an airplane occasionally, or I just feel bad. I just can't. I have to put water in them. So if I drink a conventional wine, I will drink a white or a rosé, and I'll add cold water to it. And so what I'm doing there is, in effect, just minimizing the amount of the toxicity, right? Because I'm cutting with water. So if it's 14% alcohol and I put 50% water in it, now it becomes 7%, right? And if it had these toxicities in it at 100%, now it's 50% less toxic. So I don't do it often, but in the rare, and if I'm in a restaurant and they don't have natural wines, I get this common question like, well, how do I choose wines in a restaurant? For most of the states, if you buy wine from us or you buy natural wine somewhere else, in most of the states, including California, where we are today, they have a corkage policy. So you can take a bottle of wine in and pay a fee to have your own wine. It's generally between $10 and $40, depending upon the restaurant you're in. Sometimes it's even free. So, and you can just simply call up. There are about 40 states that allow this. So you can just call the restaurant and ask them, is there any charges if I bring in my own bottle of wine? And they'll tell you. It's called corkage, but even when you call in, the people answering the phone don't know what corkage is. So you just say, do you charge anything if I bring in my own bottle of wine? If I'm in a place where I don't have wine with me, and I need to order wine, then I typically would order in Europe and usually in France, in central France, in the central part of France, Loire Valley, or Austria, like Gruner Veltliner. So there are certain wines that are more likely to be lower in alcohol and more friendly. But even in those cases, if I don't know the wine, I'll oftentimes order a white or rosé and put water in it. I don't normally put water in reds because the taste is not really satisfactory to me. But on a white or a rosé, if you add water, it still tastes like the wine, just less so.
Or ice. I add ice sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't do that in front of French people, but
yeah, for sure.
But yeah, that is a good strategy. I was recently at one of my favorite restaurants in LA. Is called Tess on Sunset. They have a great wine selection. I think it's attached to a wine. They have their own wine shop, and I had a natural wine that was an orange wine.
Yes.
And I've just recently started learning about orange wine.
We'll send you some orange wine. They're great. Amazing.
Tell us about orange wine, because it's a fairly new thing. It just recently started popping up on menus at restaurants.
Yeah, what happened was, when we started selling and drinking natural wines, nobody had heard of a natural wine. Today, they're everywhere, right? So there are natural wine retailers in Los Angeles. There are natural wines on list, and now orange wines have had a surge in popularity in the last couple of years, although natural winemakers have been making orange wines for decades. But they've really become very fashionable of late. They're not made with oranges. What an orange wine. Let's talk about winemaking 101 for a moment, how ethyl alcohol gets in wine. And then I'll tell you the difference between red, white, and orange. And so when you make a white wine, you put grape berries in a press. You press the juice from the berry, and the juice goes into a tank where it ferments. And fermenting in a natural wine is a spontaneous fermentation because the native yeast is already present. If it's a commercial wine, they inoculate it with a lab cultured yeast after they kill the native yeast using sulfur dioxide. So, and this will also we'll also cover how wines are sugar-free or not sugar-free in this same kind of explanation. Another common question we get is, how can your wines be sugar-free and there's sugar in grape juice? But it gets back to fermentation. So, again, the white wine, you press the juice in the berries. The juice goes into a tank, and if it's a natural wine, it spontaneously ferments. And the fermentation process is like a Pac-Man. So the yeast eats the sugar. And the byproduct of that, the yeast will then expel carbon dioxide and ethyl alcohol. And so this is a fermentation with just free-run juice. You take the skins and the seeds and the stems that are in the press, and you discard those. A red wine is made differently. So a red wine, you press the juice from the skins. The juice goes into a tank. You then go to the press and you take the skins, the seeds, and the stems, and you add them to the tank where the wine is fermenting. That's how red wine gets its color, is from contact with the skin, and its tannin structure with contact from the skin, seeds, and the stems. So white wines have very little tannins. Red wines are more tannic. That comes from skin and seed contact. It's also the reason why the polyphenols are much higher in a red wine. So in a red wine, polyphenols, which made up flavonoids, antiflavonoids, antioxidants. The most famous one's called resveratrol, which no doubt you've heard of. Dr. David Sinclair is the most. Have you interviewed him?
He hasn't been on the show, but we're friendly, and I'm very familiar with his research.
So he sort of introduced resveratrol to the world. He's also a red wine drinker, drinks our wine, and is a terrifically nice man. You should have him on your show.
He drinks red wine, but he avoids meat.
Yeah. I got it.
We disagree there.
Yeah. I also eat meat.
Yeah.
So the in white wine, polyphenols are around 200 different compounds, and in red wine, there are over 800.
Wow.
As I said, the most famous one is resveratrol. So, which is the reason that red wines are generally thought to impart more health benefits than white wine. So in orange wine, this is a white wine that then has skin contact.
But no seeds, no stems?
No, the skin and seeds and stems. It all comes out of the press.
But then how is it different than red wine? It's clearly not as dark. So is it?
No, it's not as dark because the white wine skin is typically green or translucent. The red wine skin is very dark.
Oh, got it.
So the color from red wine comes from the skin.
So it's like the same production method used to make red wine, but applied to white wine grapes.
Yes, except the maceration period is typically shorter. Maceration meaning how long you leave the skins in contact with the wine is typically shorter. In many types of white wine grapes, not all, but in many types of white wine grape, it imparts a golden or orange color. Not in all of them. Some of them range from the color of lemonade to orange, right? It just depends on the grape type. But orange wine is white wine with skin contact and seed and stems. But in the industry, they wouldn't say seeds and stems, although that's included. It's just skin contact is just the way that it's described. So it can be called orange wine or it can be called skin contact wine. Let me get back to sugar for a moment. So this relates to fermentation. So wine becomes sugar-free if it's fully fermented. Fully fermentation means that the winemaker allowed the yeast to eat all of the available sugar. And when the yeast eats all of the available sugar, the yeast will then die and become lees, and they lay down at the bottom of the tank before they're kind of swimming around, right? But here's how sugar gets in wine. It's not added. If you see a wine advertisement on social media and it says no added sugar, you should just immediately distrust that company because wines never get sugar added to it. How sugar gets in wine is through a process called RS, or residual sugar. So there's this little rudimentary, pretty simple device that hangs on the edge of the wine tank during fermentation. And it will tell the winemaker exactly how much sugar is left in the wine. At such point that the winemaker is a matter of their style, and this is quite common in American wines because Americans love sugar, and they love the mouthfeel that sugar creates in a wine. So quite often, when the amount of sugar, residual sugar, is reached that's desirable to the winemaker and his or her style of winemaking, when that amount of sugar is reached, they dump sulfur dioxide into the wine and they kill the yeast, leaving residual sugar behind. Dry farm wines, all of our wines, are fully fermented. Now, it doesn't have to be a natural wine to be fully fermented. Not all natural wines are fully fermented. Conventional wines, some commercial wines, are also fully fermented. So it's not specific. It's specific to all dry farm wines. So all of our wines are fully fermented and lab tested for sugar because I don't want to drink sugar. Just the same thing. One of the reasons I don't drink most kombuchas or cider. Cider is another example. You know, I love the taste of apple cider with a little bit of sugar in it. But a sugar-free cider, I just don't enjoy the taste of it. It's too austere. It's not round enough. It's too edgy. It's too sharp. And the same thing I find in kombuchas that are lower in sugar. They just don't taste as good as the ones that have sugar in them.
Yeah.
And most of the best-selling kombuchas have 10 to 12 grams of sugar in it. Not the 32 grams of a cola, but still higher than I want to consume.
Right.
So that's how you make an orange wine, and that's how you get a sugar-free wine.
Super interesting.
Well, just a winemaker.
Yeah, I love it.
I'm not a winemaker. I'm a wine scientist. I know a lot about it.
When I first learned that dry wine meant an unsweet wine, a low sugar wine, that was a game changer for me. Any other useful bits of vernacular that might be helpful
Not really, but you see, So dry wines categorically are wines that range from 3 to 5 grams per liter, which we don't consider to be sugar-free. So we consider sugar-free, and the government considers sugar-free, and why we're able to use sugar-free as a claim is we don't allow more than 1 gram per liter. Now that's a sugar-free, statistically not a measurable amount of sugar. A wine bottle is 750 milliliters, and a liter is 1,000 milliliters. So less than 1 gram, and most of ours are 0.02 or 0.03. They're barely even measurable, right, in a liter. When you get down to the glass level, they're statistically unimportant. And why we can call it sugar-free is because there's not enough sugar in it to even manage at the glass level.
Yeah.
So, but we also much of the lower alcohol, the organic farming, the sugar-free, the lack of additives, the lack of color agents, all the things that are not in our wines also just produce a superior tasting wine. What we call the luxury of the purest natural wines on the planet. And so while our wines are affordably priced, as you know, we deliver directly to your door. They're $30-ish a bottle. That includes shipping. And so for a handcrafted, fine, natural, organically dry farmed wine product, it's pretty affordable. And so it's not like these wines are super expensive, but we do consider them to be an extraordinary luxury. I think craft is an extraordinary luxury. Organic farming is an extraordinary luxury. So we think of these products as the luxury of purity. Purity is luxury, right? And that gets back to craft. And when we look at something that is pure and has great craft, it's just luxurious. I mean, I like to think of nobody makes better crafted leather goods than the Italians. No matter where it's designed, oftentimes with LVMH brands, they're oftentimes designed in France, but always made in Italy, right? Or you look at Smyson's, one of my favorite leather companies there, based in London, but they're exclusively made in Italy. Same thing for, you can name any French luxury house, all their leather products are crafted in Italy because it's just where the best artisans are.
I love it, yeah. I mean, I've become a bit of an Anglophile as of late, and I love things. There's a shoe brand that I really like. All their shoes are made in the same English town.
Right.
For hundreds of years at this point. The idea of, some of these car brands, whether it's like Aston Martin or, German cars like Porsche, I love that there's there's legacy.
There is legacy, but all those leather interiors are, much of it's made in Italy.
Yeah. That's certainly true. But even just with pretty much with everything in life. I mean, you can find there's like the junk food version,
right?
And then there's like the legacy version. You can buy like a junk food guitar at Best Buy,
sure,
and you can go to Fender or Gibson,
sure.
So I just think it's really, and obviously these legacy things tend to be more expensive, and this is something that I've only really been able to appreciate as I've gotten older and I've become more financially secure. But so it is I think a bit of a privilege that is afforded. Not to, that's afforded, unfortunately, to the few, but nonetheless, I think it's something worth cultivating an appreciation for.
Sure.
How many calories are in a glass of wine typically? Like
natural wine,
if there's
usually,
no sugar, I'm assuming
70 to 80 calories. Conventional wines typically 95 to 120 calories.
Yeah, it's a lot.
I don't
lower.
think a lot about calories in the way I eat and live.
Yeah. Because you're an OMAD guy. You're a 1 meal a day guy.
I do. I think about. I don't think about calories at all. I think about fat, really. I think about...
well, eating 1 meal a day, you got to be thinking about how to get enough calories.
Yeah, I don't think about that either. I mean, really? I'm like, one of the reasons I eat once a day, in addition to just feeling better in general, and it doesn't work for everyone, so it's, for all the modalities that I practice, I don't suggest that one is good for all, and fasting is among those. So intermittent fasting or extended fasting doesn't work for everybody. It works for me.
Yeah.
But while there's a lot of science and benefits to fasting, like autophagy as an example, would probably be the most prominently known one. It was not what led me to fasting. What led me to fasting was really vanity. As I aged, I just couldn't stay as lean as I wanted to stay and eat more than once a day. It just became abundantly clear when I initially went on this, the lean gains or the 16-8 fasting method where I was eating twice a day in an 8-hour window. I did that for a couple of years before I sort of went hardcore on one meal a day. For me, it's, other than occasionally, it's weirdly awkward when I don't get invited to lunches often, but somebody who doesn't know me, doesn't know much about me, might invite me to a lunch, and I go and I have coffee or tea, and I'm not bothered. I'm not interested in food. People think, oh, if you see it, don't you want it? And I was like, no, I don't want it. I'm like quite repulsed by the idea.
Huh. Is your one meal a day an evening meal? Is it a morning meal?
Well, it's evening.
Evening.
If I weren't a drinker, if I didn't love wine, I'd probably eat in the mid-afternoon and give the digestive process more time to work itself out. I think optimally most experts believe that 2 or 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock would be an optimal feeding window. But for me, since I love to drink wine, then I eat before I drink.
I love it. One meal a day and an entire bottle of wine every day.
Rock and roll, brother.
I mean, I'm not saying people ought to go out and follow suit, but it seems to be working for you.
It's working out great for me.
Yeah, I'm happy about that.
We were talking earlier before we started recording. It's sort of like my view on fitness. I mean, weight loss or lean body mass can be a side effect of exercise, and not always. And you can't run away from a bad diet, as you know. Your eating habits are going to have a lot more to do with your lean body mass than your exercise protocol. So I like to say, that a side effect of exercise is sometimes the improvement of lean body mass, but the real reason I exercise is for mental health. And that I can't understand how anybody can go through life without a regular exercise protocol and maintain high quality mental health. For me, it's just one go with the other.
100%.
And Bob Iger wrote an autobiography a couple of years ago after he retired from Disney, and he was talking about his workout routine, which started quite early in the morning. And he said, I exercise for 2 reasons: sanity, 1, and vanity, 2. And so I've always appreciated that. And I find a similar effect from fasting. I just feel better.
Yeah.
And the side effect is I am able to lose or maintain the lean body mass that I want.
Yeah, I love it. Different strokes for different folks. I'm in a phase right now where I really value muscle protein synthesis.
Sure, of course. Me too.
And
Me
so
too.
I'm definitely cognizant of the fact that an even protein distribution throughout the day and hitting my protein target, which would be really difficult. I mean, I've never attempted to hit my protein target in one meal, which is, generally probably around 150 to 200 grams of protein. But I would imagine that would be really difficult due to the satiety effect of protein.
Yeah, I've experimented several times with a carnivore diet, and I just can't eat that much of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like
It's hard.
It's just like you're just satiated so quickly.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I noticed about carnivore, and also I typically try to protein load, so I'll have protein in advance of carbohydrate. I want to get that foundation. I find it allows me to have a more stable blood sugar, when I wear levels or whatever. If I protein load in advance of eating, like I like potatoes as an example.
Yeah.
I just happen to like the taste of them, and I've always liked them. And so, if I have potatoes in small, moderate amounts, I'll protein load in advance of them. I find that it has a significant mitigation on any blood sugar rise. I think if you're super interested in blood glucose, or sort of, it's worthwhile experimenting with a continuous glucose monitor and sort of seeing how different foods impact your blood glucose. If that's something is of interest to you, it's of interest to me. I think elevated blood glucose and the hyperproduction of insulin is super unhealthy.
When it's chronically elevated. I mean, I'm all about people, experimenting and gathering as much data on their bodies as possible, provided you know what to do with that data. There's a lot of people that are, that get involved. They'll start wearing a CGM and they see a blood glucose spike after eating a cup of blueberries, and suddenly they start pathologizing blueberries.
Right.
And I think that's a big problem. So there needs to be education around these tools. The tools are great.
Sure.
But there needs to be, I think.
Here's tools.
Yeah.
A Whoop on one hand.
You're stacked.
The Ultra. I like quantification. I like trying to apply understanding and knowledge, and also love the proverb, when you can't apply, science. I love the proverb, to feel is to understand.
To feel is to understand.
Right. And so when you have modalities, or you're practicing the optimization of your diet, or you don't really, there's no real proof of this, but you just know you feel better.
Yeah.
And to feel is to understand. To feel is to understand sort of, this is right for me or this is not right for me.
Well, there's nothing more valuable than that. Feeling healthy.
Drinking a bottle of wine. And then I'll recommend drinking a bottle of wine, low alcohol, sugar-free, organic, natural wine, and then you're going to feel even better.
Yeah. There you go. Well, thanks for coming in. Do you have like a discount code or something? Or we'll put a link in the show description so people can check out Dry Farm
But
wines.
Here's what we will do. We'll give your listeners a bottle of wine for a penny.
Damn.
We can't give wine away. We never discount. We have
There's a legal reason, right?
Well, we can't give alcohol away for free, so we'll give you a bottle for a penny. But we never discount wine. And I'll tell you, this is really interesting because we're an e-commerce company.
Yeah.
We only sell wine online. You can't buy our wine in restaurants or retailers. We can't get enough of it to distribute it to restaurants or retailers, so we only sell it directly to our consumers online. And as an e-commerce company, it's unusual that we never offer a discount. We do this penny bottle thing for on podcasts for listeners, but we don't discount because we believe in really fair market and trade support to these farmers who are doing something we believe in.
I get it.
Yeah, and so
I support that.
We think it's really important to vote with our dollars. We think it's really important to support these people who are doing something that we love. I got asked yesterday in an interview, well, what's the future of Dry Farm Wines? And it's like, well, I don't know, but we're super lucky. We feel super privileged every day to do something we love, something we believe in, for people who love what we do. Every single day we get to make a living doing something that we love and believe in for people who love what we do, and that's just an extraordinary thing in life.
I couldn't agree more. I feel the same way about what I do. Different world, but yeah, man. As long as you keep me stocked up,
nice.
Yeah, I'm happy about that. Thank you for coming in. We'll put like links in the show description in your whatever podcast app you're listening to this in, or on YouTube. Just look for we'll put like a link, whatever Todd throws my way. I'll be sure to put down there for you guys. Hey, if you like that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.